Welcome to the monthly Truck Stop webinar, brought to you by the Motor Carriers Insurance Education Foundation. Truck Stops presented the second Thursday of the month at 11:30 a.m. Eastern Time. These webinars are presented as industry updates for information purposes only and do not qualify for state CE credit. If you're seeking CE credits, please contact our website. We offer many CE credits, and Beth will hook you up with one of those. If you have all questions, please type them in the chat window. They will be responded to after the webinar via email. If you experience audio problems, please send us a note in the chat window or call 800-741-4084. We will attempt to correct the problems as soon as possible. Convincing your insurer to get cameras, a driver's viewpoint, presented by David Imschweiler, CIC-TRS, President, DJI Insurance Brokers, Inc., out of Pennsylvania, and of course me, Tommy Ruke, founder and education director of MCIEF. David, welcome. How are you, my friend?
Good, and yourself?
We're hanging in there. Weather's hot down here in Florida. I'm sure in Pennsylvania you're experiencing some of that too.
Yeah, they have us in the 90s for the next couple days.
Well, I like warm weather, but it's kind of too hot here. But David and I go back in a long ways. He and I ran into each other in Colorado, of all places, speaking about weather, at a CIC program involving trucking. And he talked to me. He said, I want to know more about trucker because he is an agent, but also a truck driver, which I found unique. So I've used David as a part of the MCIEF program often to say he's a truck driver as well as an agent. David, tell that story about getting that business so you know how to back into a truck. Back a truck in a dock.
When I was at a client, they had like 30 rigs and everybody's always trying to get their insurance. And I showed up to the client and we were talking and stuff and told him I had my CDL and, you know, that I was interested in helping out with his insurance. And he says, you have your CDL? He goes, get in that truck and back it in. And they had their trucks lined up and they had a truck and trailer. So I jumped in the truck and I backed it up and put it in the first shot. And I got out and he smiled. He goes, let's go to my office.
Well, that's leveraging. That's giving more than a policy. I also use an example often about doing the pre-trip, the DVIR, where you carry a ladder and extra bulbs there just to clear up, because now with the new CSA, that's going to be very important because the drivers don't want to be on hook on things they could have found if they did the DVIR and not now. So these are things that I use your stories often, David, in this area, but it's unique to that. Appreciate you spending the time together. What I want to discuss, because there's a lot of pushback on cameras, and they're becoming more and more prevalent, and they're becoming more and more of a requirement. And I hope you as an agent and a truck driver can give the attendees we have here some information so that they can approach their insurers and tell them how important it is to have this documentation that's visual, both front and rear. And we'll talk both of those as we go through there, but give them some ideas how to sell the insurer the need or the advantages of having these cameras, David. So let's go through. We just released, everybody should have seen the ATRI release, issues and opportunities with driving facing cameras. They found out that 72% do have forward facing cameras. That's a big increase, David, from what we did before. So they're becoming more prevalent. Only 18% have never used it. That's a pretty significant number. I was actually a little surprised about that. Were you not?
Oh, for sure. I'm to be honest with you, right now, this time in trucking and with how they're coming under fire with the TNT type awards in lawsuits, that I'm just really amazed that they're not standard equipment when you buy the truck anymore.
I agree with this part of it. And one thing about this pool, probably not a lot of 1 or 2 unit drivers put this in because of this ATRI's force. But the other side is only 32% have the inward facing camera. So as we go through here, we can separate the two, where I totally agree with you that the forward facing isn't necessary. I don't know why an insurance company would consider writing a risk that did not have that documentation or that means to be able to afford claims. And we'll go talk about getting the full picture, which also will be the driver facing, the inward facing cameras. So when a crash happens, the more information about what happened, the better. David, this is a thing. You get crashes, you have to do everything, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, and again, a picture's worth 1,000 words. I mean,
Exactly.
you have an incident where you get out and the police officer's there, witnesses are there, and unfortunately, some of your people who claim to be a witness may be behind the truck or in front, and the accident's happening behind them, and all of a sudden they're there, and the big bad trucker is the problem. But you come across, I know when I'm in truck stops, I talk to the truckers all the time, and the drivers and I tell them, how many times in a day do you see someone do something in front of you that could cost them their life unless you were a professional and knew what to do with your truck? It would be an accident. And they all agree. They say the four-wheelers are driving like idiots. The roads are more congested. Even when you're in the travel lane trying to play it safe, like, I drove for rail and then Johnson Horse Transportation. And the big thing is they used to tell you, ride in the travel lane, keep it easy. That way you're not merging with your blind side and stuff. But with the heavy traffic, it is so hard because people are either trying to speed up to get in front of you, or believe it or not, they just don't see you. There you are with 80,000 pounds going down the road and they're merging out and you're right there.
Yeah, the example we had I was fortunate to be on the Listen to the Road Dog radio show the other day, channel 146, which we have a program about once a month. And they talked about a trucker talking about cameras, where he was saying he was driving in adverse weather and this vehicle split around him, again, speed limiters and diverse slowing down, how they'll do that. And they started brake checking them when they got in front, shooting them all kind of language and this kind of stuff. And it was icy roads. They lost control, went on the right and came back across in front of him. He T-boned him here, called the police. Fortunately, didn't kill anybody. But of course, the three people in the car said the truck broadsided. But this happened and the policeman came up and the driver was able to show him the results of the camera in front. And the policeman changed his report and making the four-wheeler responsible, not the trucker. And he made the statement to the driver, says, driver, without that camera, I would have cited you for reckless driving. Yeah. And this is kind of stuff, not only the crash, not only when you have a violation or something where the officer's there, but you're able to rectify it because, again, as you said in this opening statement, David, a picture's worth 1,000 words. Mm-hmm. Another thing you related to, based on all the studies we had, the four-wheeler caused 75 to 85% of all crashes. But we're professional truck drivers, or you are, and the insureds that we, Motor Carriers Insurance Education insurers, are professional, so they're expected to go beyond just the normal. And as you said, it's like I see I tell people on the front bumper to take the skull and crossbones off or the jaws off, which is absolutely stupid. But also think all people see in the front dollar signs, mm-hmm. and they hit the lottery here. So, and all the billboard lawyers are there not realizing this. And we are starting from scratch. And there's always going to be, as you pointed out so clearly, either intentional or really unintentional witnesses that always want to blame the truck. Why? They're the biggest thing they see. They see the results of it, not what started all the accidents, because you never look at these things until you have a chance or a reason to look at it, and that's a lot of noise. And at that point, you don't see the four-wheelers. You see maybe where it lands. This is a big thing to not only get the facts right for the crash as well as possible, but also to set the stage for defense later or for violation checks, David.
Well, I think too, the two things here, Tommy. One is the PR, like you were referring to, the attorneys on TV all the time, the PR, like you said, hitting the lottery, that big name on the side of the truck. People think they're billionaires and they got money just falling out of their pockets. And that PR kind of bled into your regular police force. And policemen are great. They got a tough job to do. Some of the drivers get confrontational with the police officers, but I have found when it comes to accidents, if it's a police officer who doesn't have a whole lot of interaction with truckers, he's kind of like your general public, bad truck drivers. If you got a police officer who's part of the crew that just does all the inspections of trucks and interact with the trucks, and they're the ones that sometimes show up after the accident. I mean, I think it's Texas that if you get pulled over by a regular trooper, he can't cite a trucker for certain trucking violations because they consider him not trained. So a lot of times they'll call in another trooper that's certified to do the inspection of the trucks and stuff like that. You see it when you're at the weigh stations. I mean, I had a similar situation when I was running flatbed with the way the weight was displaced on the truck. You have certain requirements on front axles and your back axles and stuff. And if they're not experienced, they try to cite you on things that, even down to the mud flaps, the distance. You know, we have regulations on how far our mud flaps have to come down, so we're not throwing stones and that type of stuff. And you and I talked before this started when we were talking about all the lights. The general public doesn't realize when you see a truck that's all dressed out in lights, that's great stuff. But he cannot have one light bulb out on the trailer lights or any of those accessory lights to make it look fancy. He can get cited. So when you see a truck dressed up like that, you know that that trucker is very conscious, self-conscious on the wherewithal that he's got to inspect and do his walk around. We have ladders on board that we have to change out bulbs and so forth. Check the brakes, the slack adjusters. Years ago, the trucker could adjust his own. Nowadays, most companies, you've got to bring it into the shop, have them do it so that you have it all documented because of the way the lawsuits are. But yeah, that PR has really bled into even the legal system, and it's against the truckers. So go ahead.
You know, a couple things that you brought to mind as you walk through the, first off, you're right. Any officer can do a level 3 inspection. That's the driver inspection. That's just the right credentials, the insurance, which actually is not the filing, it's just the insurance cab card for the insurance part of it. Hours of service can look at that. Anything beyond that, they have to have a special DOT trained for the level 2, which is the walk around, or level 1, which is underneath it. The other thing reminds me of this article. We have one of our presenters at Advanced Underwriting tells the story that his brother was a truck driver, and at Thanksgiving, his brother was cussing the camera. Came back for Christmas, his brother was praising the camera because in the interim, they had a crash that saved his fanny because he had a camera and saved his job. So I guess once you have that kind of experience, David, it makes a real difference there. But you're right, absolutely right. So to me, it's a no-brainer for the front view.
And the camera puts it into perspective. The nice part is a lot of the cameras will have the date and time ticking in seconds on the screen when you play back. So it can show exactly how quick something has occurred. And it also shows when you are in a situation where what I call a four-wheeler harassing you. You'll get into a situation, and I'm sure the viewers will see this when they're driving down the road, where you get a car who will pass the truck, then they slow down. So then the truck comes out and passes them, gets by them, comes over. Then the car comes out and passes them. And through time, it just becomes a very aggravating situation, whether either they don't want to be behind you or whatever. And it can escalate into a road rage for some reason with some of these people.
That's the example I used for brake checking, what you're talking about. Get in front of them and then slow down, put on the brakes. That's a real problem with this part of it, David. And they need to be aware, all cameras aren't the same. So you want the ones that capture the minutes before, the minutes after, and keep it continuous. Some of these GoPros you buy at the truck stops, your driver drives truck stop, just aren't adequate enough to show the whole pictures. And a lot of that can't be downloaded right at the site and things like that. So they need to invest, you know, at least $150, $200 in a good camera if they're going to do it, so that it can keep the memory and have a little documentation, or hook up with a fleet situation. They hook up with a third-party provider that actually monitors and reads those things and gives the motor carrier some alerts when the drivers have some of these kind of problems there, and are able to quantify those things. Those are usually with a cost, monthly cost, and a lot of insurance companies are requiring it and actually are subsidizing those forward cameras with these third-party providers like Drive Safe and those kind of people, David. You see some of those in the marketplace. I'm sure you insure a couple of insurance companies that do have a subsidy or requirement, both of those forward-facing cameras. We had the crash, and then the other camera comes in place. Drivers push back on any cameras to start with. Seems like the road facing are becoming more acceptable. There's still a lot of pushback from driver facing. What if it shows I'm doing something wrong and caused a crash? It's an invasion of my privacy. Big Brother is watching. Have you heard these kind of stories, part of it? Well, the thing about this slide picture we have that we put together here, if we did something wrong, David, we want to know about it day one. In fact, the place I can tell you that we absolutely can save money with crashes is when we did something wrong, so we settle it. We don't pay lawyers. We don't do all that kind of stuff. If you don't have the whole picture, even if you got the forward facing, the inward facing becomes a problem. It's not an invasion of privacy when the truck's running down the highway, because that's a place of employment. We had one of the drivers said on the Road Day radio show, if they gave a driver facing camera, I'm going to go walk from Walmart. And a friend of ours on the show with me said, Walmart has cameras too watching you. So, duh, it's the kind of thing. Big Brother's not watching. It's your company and all watching. If you're doing everything right, what's the problem then? So crash happens, the camera shows exactly what happens. Insurance companies decide to settle or fight. This is a choice, because we get a lot of complaints from the insurers. I hear you. Why did you settle that claim? Mm-hmm. There's a lot of parameters in that we talk about in advanced coverage that you've been through, as far as it saves dollars and can we get it off cheap. And, even though we might not be totally wrong, we can save money by, spending a few dollars in that thing here. Bad videos, we were wrong. Do not pay lawyers. Settle as soon as possible with a fair amount. And today's marketplace, this is where people are going now, and you're finding more and more adjusters and more lawyers that have this approach to it, part of it. In fact, one of the ones we were on a show with the other day said, I was able to settle a claim. I had the other attorney come in there. I showed the party what the camera showed. We apologized for what we did wrong. And I said, we're offering you X dollars for this. Now, lawyer who works for the plaintiffs, tell them how long it's going to take them to get those X dollars and how much you're going to take out of it. They accepted the settlement. Mm-hmm. So they settled for money. I mean, a lot of money, $750,000, but it could have been $1 million claim. But we know the facts. We're able to deal with the facts. Good video, driver and company did nothing wrong. Let the plaintiff see what the client caused the crash. A lot of times they bring that to the plaintiff because plaintiffs don't want to chase money they're never going to collect. And right. As long as you got favorable video, both front and back, they'll walk away from it. In fact, one case I found out that there were only 6 different plaintiffs' attorneys, and they still haven't found anybody that would take the case here because the facts are there. Fight now, and you will have the facts to do so. And so, armed with it. Crash scene, again, offers sees what really happened and needs to make sure their report reflects the facts. Their report is not admissible in court, but it is persuasion in court. And they have some testimony, because most of the time, the reason it's not admissible is they see hearsay, what other people say, and they see after the fact. So the only thing can be admissible in court is actual facts. I saw it done, or I have a record of what happened. Well, in the case of cameras, guess what we have, David? The record. Mm-hmm. So this is the important part that we have to deal with.
To add to that, Tommy, what I see too that helps me when I'm talking to the guys, a lot of times when you go through your driver training with the new companies and you usually have a week of sitting through class, what they expect and stuff, and when they get to the accident stuff, you get a kit to put in the truck with a camera to take pictures if you have an accident. It's a little, disposable camera. And I always said the problem with that's after the fact. Okay, and nobody sees exactly what happened during the accident. You see where the vehicles end up, and sometimes physics can't even explain it, where at least with the video they'll explain it. And the drivers who are worried about the camera facing them, I always say to them, put yourself in the owner's point. He's putting you into a truck that's anywhere from $150,000 to $180,000 plus whatever the cargo is and everything. He has a right to know what you're doing when you're driving. Okay, everybody gets mad when you're called a steering wheel holder as a driver. And to me, that's where you get to highlight your professionalism. Okay, I know some guys worry, well, what if I'm drinking my coffee or I'm eating my sandwich or something like that? And it's like, fine. You pray that if you're doing that, you're doing the speed limit, you're in the travel lane, you're being aware of everything that's around you. You're a professional. You're held to a higher standard. If you're in traffic, and that's where a lot of these accidents occur, in heavy traffic, you shouldn't be drinking your coffee. You shouldn't be eating your sandwich. And that camera will remind you of that. That camera will tell you that, listen, you are a professional. You see things differently than most motorists. You're trained. First of all, you're trained, the 7-second follow rule is what they should. I always used to get on the CB. If I saw a trucker tailgating a car, I used to get on the CB and call him out. I go, oh, that's real professional of you. And, you know, you'd get some chatter back and forth, but they usually would back away because we're trying to police our peers, because we're all fighting that image of the big bad trucker.
David, I had a statement before on this part of it. Think about, and actually I used this one time in a taxi driver when I was going to a program and they were talking about a truck. How many could you get 6 or 12 jurors in a room in panel who think $25 a day is good pay to be on the jury part of it, or it's nice retirement, they had nothing else to do and can't think of a reason to get off of jury duty, which is tough in one sense in that part of it, that has not been scared by a truck on the highway. And you're right, every one of the bad actors end up causing an image in their mind. So we can counter some of that by having the facts and those images. And the problem with the facts, David, is the forward cameras show the four-wheeler was the cause, and there's no driver view. We only got half the story. As you pointed out, you're going to say, somebody's going to say, well, they were or they could have been on the cell phone, or they were distracted, as you mentioned, eating something, lunch, or this kind of stuff, part of it here. And so even in that case where we know the front happened and the driver didn't do anything wrong, if this allegation comes, guess what? We still have to defend that. We still don't have the whole story. And those are where we pay a little money, or sometimes a lot of money, not to go to court. And that has to factor to do what's the driver's past history, how can they be monitoring stuff. All this comes in place that you talk about invasion of privacy. Wait until a plaintiff attorney does a deposition. If you think invasion of privacy is something the cameras show, that plaintiff really can really stir things up. That's the reptile theory, which tries to back the drivers in the thing, in the picture. So the forward camera shows what's good facts, but all the facts are not there. You still have to decide how to handle the case. Both forward and driver-facing cameras remove those doubts, David. There is a myth here that, and you're familiar with cameras, but most of those cameras only collect things when the truck is moving, right? It's not, they don't care about your bed or this kind of stuff. It's when they are driving the truck. And these are the ones that you have, because unlike the forward-facing cameras where you get one at a truck stop, you can buy one from J.J. Keller for $175 front view. The inward-facing cameras are usually supplied by a third-party provider that provides both, that gives more than just the camera itself. And so there's certain rules you set up and certain privacy rules that they have to live with to provide the driver with privacy. But David, you drive down the highway. You're a truck driver. You consider you a professional truck driver. Do you use your cell phone when you're driving?
Heck no. Heck no.
You drink coffee. And do you see the latest one? Somebody was looking at T-Top, whatever that website is, and they killed 5 people. They found out later because they subpoenaed the driving record or the videos and found later that he was, I mean, their cell phone, and the later was watching a website here, and he said, oh, and he ran in the back of somebody because he wasn't paying attention when the traffic was stopped. That's the kind of stuff that you said. 2 things. We went in a minute where that camera tied to a proper application can warn you, and we'll talk about that in a second. But this is where we take all doubts off. So let's talk about that. Actually, studies show driver-facing frontage often exonerates a trucker. The proposed expanding type of non-preventable crashes. Are you familiar with that program, David? You want to explain that, where the non-preventable crashes?
Well, non-preventable crashes is where the trucker had no choice. There was nothing he could do. Okay, it wasn't preventable at all from his standpoint.
And you got the 4 DOT reportables: fatality. I mean 3, but fatality, injured, or towed. And then in those, they came up about the first 7, 8, which was really weird, because you had to hit the truck just right to be not side swipe, but direct T-bone part of it here. And so the crash is still sent here, but the preventable and non-preventable affects your crash scores.
Yes.
And this is an important part here. But they just ruled out new. They just expanded, realized basically what you said. If it's truly unpreventable, then the driver could not have prevented it. The first ones where you hit an animal, somebody hit you that was drunk, somebody hit you when you were stopped, run away when you were somebody going down the wrong way road. There were about 7 or 8. But guess what the new one says? On the last one, the bottom, the catch-all is any other type of crash otherwise standing outside the crash preventable termination program, meaning those list of things. Program. If there is video attached depicting this consequence of the event, we'll consider it unpreventable. David, they're helping us. I mean, again, this is the new federal rules you have. So if nothing else, from a fleet standpoint, you're going to get the preventable taken off or non-preventable taken off your records, so the DOT doesn't come and visit you more often, and so the insurance company does not see that record as a part of your consideration, or at least considers it's non-preventable. And this is a big step here. I don't know if you were aware of this new rule, David.
It's huge for the driver because, again, it gets back to the conversations the drivers have in the truck stop when this stuff comes up, is the fact that, you know, before the trucker could be parked and hit and he's going to be considered at fault for the accident, which some companies will fire a guy. And now, I mean, trucks, since I started back in like 2009, 2010 driving, the big thing is truck parking and not being able to find parking. So when the trucks park along the side of the road, they're considered at fault for the accident if someone falls asleep and runs into the back of the truck because they feel he should have been in a truck stop. And you do get some police officers who will wake the trucker up and tell him to find something. But if he's out of hours, I mean, I have one friend who runs fire pipe for fire hydrants from the east to the west coast. And he actually was in a situation where he was asleep on the side of the road. He was pretty far off, but the police officer came up, woke him up, and he said, well, I'm out of hours. And the cop said, I don't care. I know where there's a place. And he actually escorted him into a legal parking where he could legally park for the night, and didn't give him a hard time on his hours or anything like that. And he basically wanted to see the safety for him and the traveling public.
Yeah, David, and of course the big push right now in Congress is more parking. It's going to take a while to do that, but I think we'll get funded that because it looks like only the last statistic says only about 1 out of parking space, about 1 out of 12 drivers actually is a parking space that can be parked legally, that part of it. But this is, again, you've proven everything there. And there's another thing that's come up, comparative negligence. This is big here, because a lot of states have comparative negligence, and this simple comparative negligence says that you look at what happened and set a degree of negligence based on the two parties, the plaintiffs and the trucking company, quote, trucking driver. And depending on who is the most negligent would pay a percentage of their damages. For example, a crash happened and the parties get injured, and let's say you got a damaged, little medical bills and all damaged at $500,000. And if the driver is, the plaintiff is 25% negligent in that, they don't collect that full amount. They only collect 75% of it, vice versa. That's the big damages, and that's offset. Again, if you prove both forward and rear, you can establish that. But the new tort reforms are good. Florida has modified it. Florida is now the poster child of tort reform for truckers, because there's some states, and Florida now has brought it into the law, modified comparative negligence. David, modified comparative negligence, and some states accept this beyond Florida. This is just the new Florida law that came in. If the other side is more than 50% negligent, they can collect nothing. If you go back to the facts earlier, the four-wheeler causes the crash 45 to 75% of the time. The more we have an app to prove that, the greater chance we get out to pay nothing, not only just the percentage of nothing, but nothing. Every state recognizes one of those kind of process. Again, the more documentation, the better off. The Texas law went in a little different. It said that if there's no negligence in the first part of the trucker, then you can't introduce the CSA stuff, the things that make the reptile theory blow up cases. So again, both of these are saying prove the crash prove the driver didn't do anything wrong. David, I don't know how you can prove that without cameras.
Well, that's what I was going to say. This is huge to have the camera on the inside of the truck, because if this law is the way it is, you're showing the driver is doing what the driver's supposed to be doing. The car made the mistake, and like the trucker couldn't avoid the brake check or the merge that they were coming out in. It's huge because the trucker's doing what he's to do. He's driving the truck. He's not doing anything wrong. It was caused by a four-wheeler. This gets back to why I got into selling truck insurance. Was way back then, at the time, stats showed that really truckers were only 33% at fault for the accidents. And you talk to any agent out there, wouldn't you love to have an auto loss ratio at 33% in your office? I mean, that's like hitting the lottery for an insurance agent. So, I mean, I push them. I tell the guys, you know, it's something that after a while, it becomes part of your day. Like you were saying about Walmart. People go to work in Walmart, there's cameras all over. There's cameras everywhere. Look at what you see on these social media sites where, you know, you're watching the mailman come in to the house to deliver, right up to where they're fixing flags for people, they're delivering packages. I mean, it's showing the public cameras are everywhere. You might as well just let it in the truck.
And David, I don't know what the monitoring cameras on all costs and all this. And again, driver facing cameras are more costly because you got to have a third party provider. But why don't we have cameras in the sides and the rear? They're available now, relatively inexpensive part of this. I don't know if you're familiar with some of those New Orleans stage crash sites that happen in New Orleans, where they stage the crashes and someone runs in the back of the trailer.
Yeah,
this part. It costs. I was on the radio show the other day with a lawyer who found this case, part of it here, and I had heard a program he had done 5 or 6 years ago. He settled these cases. He said they spent $40 million to $50 million on these cases before they found out what was happening. 44 people are now in jail. One got killed because they turned witnesses. We don't know who killed him, this part of it. But nobody's prosecuting those things. But the reason they found that is they've had side cameras to show it was staged. And therefore, you got the evidence to do it, to counter these kind of things. So, you know, what's it cost? Could you outfit your truck with cameras all the way around, David, for $500-600?
I'm sure. If you look at some of the new tractor trailers that are being produced, they don't even have the side view mirrors anymore. It's cameras. They're viewing cameras because it gives them, there's no blind spots anymore.
The eagle eye.
I hate it driving at night in the rain. Years ago, they used to use the reflective lines where they would reflect in the rain from the headlights. Nowadays, when you're driving and you're looking out the side mirror or your fender mirror and you're seeing the car come up, you get that blind spot, but also with the rain and everything and the low light, it's hard to see. Sometimes these people hang by your tandems. And if you have to do an avoidance maneuver in the rain with a truck, you know, you're constantly looking. You're trained that instead of taking somebody else out, you're taking yourself out. That's why you see trucks down embankments and into medians and stuff, because they're trying to avoid a crash. It's not all at the sleepy trucker syndrome. It's something occurred in front of him. He didn't want to run over and kill a family, so he ditched the truck. So
yeah, and that eagle eye is something that's going to be relatively positive in the future. I had a couple of stories about that because I know a party who was part of the ones who first developed that program. David, he's been on the show with us before. But it'll save fuel costs, by the way, a couple percentage of fuel costs because of the wind resistance part of it. But he told the story that they tried to get FMCSA regulation rules and went to a thing, and the FMCSA officer said, yeah, but my rear view mirror in my car fogs up sometime, you know, gets dirty and all that. And he said, will you come to a test site with us? And he did. And they went through snow and ice. Those cameras don't fog up. They have coating on them. They don't do it. And after he got out of that truck, I'll approve the camera. It's far better. It takes the whole picture. It takes the blind spot away. The more we can help the driver be safe with videos and cameras and to prove they did it wrong, David, is a positive thing. It bugs my mind about why it's not more acceptable. I realize most drivers are old, the old way and this kind of stuff, but you're not that old. You're one of the newer drivers. You're more accepting of this stuff. But you find this pushback for no reason, don't you, David?
Yeah, I mean, the truckers are always talking about the four-wheelers. It's always the four-wheelers. Well, if that's the case, then get the camera, because you only have to benefit from it. I mean, we up here in PA, the Pennsylvania Motor Truck Association really pushes the touch a truck outings for the kids and stuff, because like you said, unless you get someone in the truck to see what a trucker sees sitting in that seat, they don't realize. They have no clue, there's this stigma of the dumb trucker. They don't realize there's like 180 points of inspection before you even pull out of your spot that you have to check on the truck when you're doing your walk around. There's all this stuff involved, and the trucker needs, I said, the one gentleman I remember distinctly who was against the cameras was worried, like you were referring to earlier, the privacy. And they're only on when the truck is moving. It's not even if the truck's idling, they don't even go on. They don't activate in most cases. It's the moving. It's kind of rigged up to the electronic logs. If you're going in between picking up trailers and stuff, your log's not logging that because you're within the yard. So there's so many benefits from it. It's just getting in. I find it the old trucker who doesn't want his privacy invaded, but you can't fight it anymore. You just can't. It's too much at risk.
Let's turn this around. You come in the court cases with our hands tied behind our backs because of just the social media, the history, the fear of cameras, the dollars, the plaintiff's attorneys being ahead of the defense attorneys. So the only way to counter that is with facts. And the only way you're going to have undisputable facts is a picture of everything that happened.
And don't let out the police officers. Don't let out the police officers. Yes, the attorneys and all that, but the first person on scene is usually a police officer, okay? And he's the one that determines a lot of times the outcome of this stuff through his investigation. And it's really, really important to be able to say, listen, this is a picture of me driving. This is a picture of the front of the truck and what's going on and how long this has transpired. Was it seconds? Was it immediate? Was it, a 10-minute travel down the road with cars harassing you? We joked around the one time down in Florida, if you ever see the big crows or eagles flying and the little birds harassing them. I said, that's what it's like driving a truck, because you could just be minding your own business, and for some reason, somebody just has it out for you, and whether they want to get into an accident, but I'm like, is it worth getting killed over?
And that brings us to this other slide. We're almost at the end here, David. I appreciate your time, but it's a reminder. We find in our trucking life, and you can help me with this or disagree with that, there's three types of driver: inexperience, experience, and then complacency. Right. I know it all. I've done it. I've done away with it here. And we actually have statistics from underwriting standpoint that a driver with some experience and the technology you can have on trucks today is a better driver than someone with a lot of experience and no technology.
Correct.
Better risk this part because of stuff. And now you have the new apps that can warn the driver. It's not to police them, to warn them when they're doing something wrong, to remind them to keep their roads on the highway. I mean, eyes on the highway. David, this is the new wave, and this is going to be something that the insurance companies are going to start looking at favorable, and the insurance companies are going to start part of the program because these things have proven to reduce crashes because they keep the driver alert. They keep the driver aware of their actions, some of them intentional, some of them not intentional. And at the same time, you got the proof of everything. Use of the cell phone. I mean, number one cause of all this, look at four wheels, distracted driving. And this happens all the time. They look at the eyes not focused. This is when they're sleepy. These are the kind of things these alerts have. Again, I hate to go back and talk about the experience I hear on the Road Dog Radio Show, but drivers, and this is a driver who's on the safe driving team. He's one of the ones here. He bought this just to remind him to be safe. It was a warning. He didn't, not for defending him. He's an owner operator. He said, I need to be aware of this. And he made a couple of comments. A couple of times they turned him on when his eyes were focused away. He said, I need to hear. One time he warned him when he thought he was too close to the truck, the car in front. And he looked at it and says, no, no. Then he looked at it again and says, I probably was. It's just to keep them focused on their job. And their job is to drive down the highway safely and bring them home safely, Dave. Yep. And so why, again, the resistance. So I want to conclude it. Just give me some ideas about how an agent like yourselves can approach the insured about using cameras, and the value of them and the necessity of them in the future, and how important this is to the insurance industry to save these loss ratios, to help the industry better from being able to defend claims because they got more facts.
My approach to the smaller guy is, this is their living. It's one or two drivers driving. And when I talk to them, I tell them, listen, would it not really get your goat that you lose your livelihood or you end up in jail over something you were totally innocent on? And if you had that camera, it would prove it. And that you are, and again, it gets back to being professional. As a professional, I think this is something a professional should do. Okay, you are a professional driver. I mean, they're even putting cameras anymore in operating rooms and in other places. So if a doctor's not worried about a malpractice lawsuit because a camera is watching him do surgery, I said, as a truck driver, I mean, you get in there, and I think, Tommy, it would be great if you could get a picture and put it out there to everybody of what the dashboard of a tractor trailer looks like. It's almost like being a pilot. You got a lot of stuff you have to monitor while you're driving. And it's nice to have the audible alarm. When I was driving the one time we were heading down to Florida, the company would allow us up to 72 miles an hour, be it when we were running 95 and stuff. So when you went over 72, you got an alarm. Okay, it would go off. If you got in one trip 3 alarms, you were called into the office, okay, and kind of dressed down about going over 72 miles an hour, because at 55, it takes a football field to stop an 80,000-pound truck, okay? So people need to realize that when they're doing the brake checking, that, that truck's not stopping on a dime. And for the small truck drivers, it's imperative for them to have it. It's such a small investment. Okay, it's when you're paying $700 and $800 for a tire. Okay, nowadays the way the inflation went up to replace your tires, it's $200-300 is nothing. It's nothing to keep yourself in business.
And if you're a professional truck driver and you're doing everything right, why not document it?
Right.
And that's the negative part of the insurance industry. I mean, if you don't do it, then you're hiding something. And second thing, we all need alerts. I have in my car, I have, the side alert, this stuff here. I have the automatic brake. It doesn't happen often, but every now and then it reminds me I'm too close to something. I'm over the line, this kind of stuff. And it just reminds me, it's just a fail safe. And it's driver assistance and driver proving we did it right, David, and we're not at fault. If we are at fault, then we'll pay. But we need to know all that stuff too, and this helps us. And with deteriorating the court cases which pick on truckers and the deteriorating loss ratios or the loss ratio sensitivities of people who are riding 18-wheelers, we just need to take every tool we have to make the driver safer, give them a much alert, and be able to prove what exactly happened. Because I believe, like you do, the truck driver is not at fault, but maybe 70 to 75, 20, 30% of those times. It's mostly a four-wheeler. So prove it, right? The only way you can prove it is with cameras. David, I really appreciate you spending time with us, my friend. We're going to talk about next month, interesting too, PSPs versus MVRs. That's another hot subject there. So that'll be done next week on our next webinar there. David, be safe, my friend. I look forward to seeing you soon. Thank you for your time today.
Sure. You have a great day.
Thanks, David.